meeting will come to order. Could we please have the roll call?
Sure. Ken Oleski,
Here.
Nick Burns,
Here.
Nina Beasley,
Here.
Cindy Bessie,
Here.
and for the record, it's planning and zoning meeting, January 15th. Thank you.
All right, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so are there any corrections to the December 18th, 2024 regular meeting minutes that you all have seen? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, motion passes. So the first action item is consideration of adopting a resolution setting the time of regular meetings to 5:30 p.m. All right.
Yeah, so, commissioners, before you is a resolution. The city council has decided to set the, time of their regular meetings to 5:30. Typically and historically, planning and zoning has always matched that so that it's consistent, in the calendar every month, that the meetings are at the same time, whether it's city council or planning and zoning. Under Idaho, or under our city code, the planning and zoning commission sets the time and dates of their, days of their meetings via resolution, and so a resolution is before you tonight for consideration on changing the times of planning and zoning meetings moving forward to 5:30 to match city council.
Would you like the resolution to be read, or is it okay to not have to
You
do
don't need
that?
to read it, no, it's not an ordinance, so you don't need to
Alright.
read it.
Is there a motion to approve resolution 025-001?
I move that we make the motion to prove it, to approve it.
Okay. Is there a second?
I second.
All right.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, motion passes. So the next action item is consideration of adopting the, hold on, we already did that.
No.
Did we? Oh, consideration of adopting the 2025
Yep.
regular meeting schedule.
Yeah, so, commissioners, under Idaho code, we are required to do both a meeting notice and an agenda notice, for every meeting. The meeting notice can be, fulfilled through an adopted annual meeting schedule. City council does this, and we have typically posted one for you guys, but I wanted to start having you guys formally adopt it, so we can have a formally adopted meeting notice schedule posted. So this would be the meeting schedule. It's for every third Wednesday, for the year. And as you can see, we have the new start time at 5:30 since that was just adopted. And, if we have cancellations, we would put those on the website. So if we end up with a meeting, with not enough business or no business, we would end up canceling that. We've done that in the past, so those would all get posted. But to start the year, this would be our meeting schedule. Are any questions?
Is there a motion to approve the 2025 regular meeting schedule? The
Yeah.
regular?
Make a motion to approve that new schedule as listed.
All right, is there a second?
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank
Okay,
you.
so motion passes. The next action item, consideration of electing a commission chair and vice chair for 2025.
So, commissioners, we, per your guys' code in the, Rathdrum City Code, annually, we are supposed to elect a chair and vice chair. For 2024, Nina was the chair and Nick was the vice chair. You guys are welcome to make a motion to proceed with the same, positions, or you may change them as you wish. I'll let you guys, talk about that.
I wanna give up my vice chair.
Okay.
Which one of you guys would like to have that?
Well, first, Okay, actually, can we maybe start with the chair and then vice chair?
Yeah, I just assumed you,
It's all up to you guys. It's if you all want me to continue as the chair, I'm happy to do so. But if one of you wanted to do it as well, I'm happy for you to do that as well. So it's all up to all of you.
with you continuing.
I move that we keep the chair the same.
All right.
Nina,
And
so
then-
we have a motion to keep Nina as chair.
Is there
Yeah.
a second?
I second the motion.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. So now the vice chair.
yeah. I think one of you two should take it.
It's
do it.
yours.
No, I yield to you.
I graciously yield it to you.
All right.
What happens now? What, nobody else wants it?
Fight!
Nick's
If no one wants to be the vice chair, we just wouldn't elect one, and then if Nina were ever not to be here, the three of you left would need to nominate one of you to run that meeting at that
Okay.
time.
That's what the vice chair does.
Okay.
Because that's what the
Are
vice
you
chair would
sure
do if
you
you
don't
fill in.
want
Yeah,
to?
I'm
Because you
sure.
know I come to every meeting.
Yeah.
Like I don't ever not come
I mean,
to
we
a
don't
meeting.
technically have to have a vice chair if we're not able to come to an agreement. Like I said though, if Nina were to not come to one, then we would need you three to agree on who would run that meeting at that time.
That sounds perfect. What about if we get a new person, can we?
And then if we get a new person, we can throw them under the bus,
Perfect.
that's fine too.
Okay.
That's a
Yeah.
big bus.
Okay, that's fine. So we'll just go with the chair if that's totally fine.
Okay. Well, and I'll just make sure I'm not sick.
Yeah.
I work hard to stay healthy all month for this meeting.
For this meeting.
Okay, so we now have a workshop, the legal overview of Idaho Code Section 67-6535 on land use action decisions.
Okay. So this workshop has not come about because of anything you guys necessarily have done wrong. I am trying to be more on top of legal training. Obviously we have 2 new commissioners who have not received any formal legal training from me. As far as land use decision goes, I have land use presentations that I've given to the other commissioners and to council in the past. So I'm trying to stay up on my legal training for you guys, and this is kind of the basis of your guys' decisions that we need to make sure that you're aware of moving forward. And so this is informal. Please feel free. Nick, Nina, you guys have had probably something similar to this in the past. If you have something you want to add, feel free to jump in, or if you guys have questions, please just jump in and ask, because I want this to be a learning conversation between us as we kind of go through it. So first, where does Rathdrum's land use governing power come from? So you guys may have heard this before, maybe you haven't, but Idaho is considered a Dillon Rule state. Has anybody heard of a Dillon Rule before? The Dillon Rule? Nothing? Okay. So what that means is that the local jurisdictions in Idaho only have the power to do stuff that has been specifically granted to said jurisdictions through the Idaho Code. If it hasn't been granted in Idaho Code, local jurisdictions can't do it. So it has to be granted in order for us to do it. The other option, which other states have, is called the Home Rule state, in which they specifically take away powers from local jurisdictions, and if it's not specifically taken away, then the local jurisdictions can do it. So that would be the other option, but for us, we have to look to Idaho Code to see what they've told us we can do, what we have the authority to do, and then we have to follow that, because that's all we have the authority to do. Does that make sense? Okay, so we get into the Local Land Use Planning Act. That's where the authority for the city to pass zoning codes and subdivision codes comes from. It also is where it dictates the processes we have to go through for approving and reviewing land use applications that we receive. Like having public hearings, noticing for those hearings 15 days beforehand, how we do decisions, how if someone wants to sue for judicial review, how that happens, and the time periods for all of that. All of that is within the Local Land Use Planning Act, is how all of that comes down. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay. And so, like I said, that's where all of our authority comes from when it comes to our land use code that we use within the city. It's from Title 67, Chapter 65. It's also called LUPA. So if you hear me say LUPA, that's the Local Land Use Planning Act. Any questions so far? Good, staying with me? Alright, so we're gonna go straight to one of the codes within the LUPA because it kinda sets the basis for how you guys make decisions on land use actions. It's section 6535, and it's called approval or denial of any application to be based on express standards and to be in writing. Kind of sets the tone for what it means.
Can
So
you,
there's-
do you have a way to just enlarge it just a little bit?
I don't think so.
Okay, no worries.
Maybe I can do it this way.
Okay.
I don't know if that's better
It's
or
a,
worse.
I know, it's okay. If you can't, it's fine.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so this kind of has two main parts. The first is that the express standards part, that any decision has to be based on express standards that are set forth in our land use ordinances. And then there's a second part where you have to have a reasoned statement for your decision. So we're gonna kind of break those down into the two parts. Okay, so in the first part, you have this quote, "This such approval standards and criteria shall be set forth in express terms in the land use ordinances." What does that mean? This means that the approval standards and criteria that you guys use for every land use decision, from conditional use permits to annexations to zoning to plats to plan use and developments, all of those different decisions that might come before you, those criteria for approval have to be expressly stated within our land use code.
Which is what Rathdrum City Code, the ordinance gets adopted, it is code, it's all the same thing.
Yes. And so we kind of get to this, when we break it down, what does express mean? What does it mean when Idaho Code is saying these have to be express standards? This has been interpreted by the courts to mean that criteria cannot be arbitrary. What does that mean? They must be able to be reviewed by the public with the understanding that an application either meets or does not meet the criteria. There can be no room for the criteria to be interpreted one way for one application, but a different way for a different application. This would defeat the purpose of having an express standard. Does that make sense? That express standards mean we have to have criteria listed for each land use action that is either a yes, it meets this, or no, it does not, and you have objective criteria, like objective ways to figure out if it meets those things. Does that all make sense? Okay. Okay. Oh man, having it blown up like this is... Okay. So then the next portion of this code is, in order that permit applicants, interested residents, and decision makers alike may know the express standards that must be met. This is kind of the why. Why do we want to have express standards? So that everyone's put on notice on what they have to meet before they even submit an application, or before they have to make a decision. They know, here's the criteria that must be met for this application to be passed, to be approved. Here it is. Everyone's put on notice. That's why we have express criteria. We don't want someone to get blindsided when they bring an application before our elected officials or our commission, and have something happen in the decision that they weren't expecting. That should not happen. Unexpected decisions should not happen. Everything should be known when an application is submitted, whether or not they meet the code or not, and they should get approval. That all make sense? Okay. Okay, so here is an example from our code. Put this kind of back up in this section. Okay. So this is just our R1 zoning district. As you can see, we have criteria, and then there goes 1, 2, and 3. These are our express criteria, our express standards that you would use for approving a zoning of R1. If an application came before you, whether it's like a rezone came before you and someone wanted to rezone their property to R1, these are the criteria you would look at. These are the ones that are within our code. They are the express standards, and that's what you would use. As you can see, they are expressed because there's not really any wiggle room for an unexpected result. It's in areas where physical limitations limit of soil topography and other factors limit development to low density. That's a yes or no. Are there physical limitations that limit that to low density? Yes or no? Are there any areas where carrying capacity of collector or arterial streets require lower traffic levels? Yes or no? In areas where municipal water facilities and sewer disposal facilities are provided? Yes or no? Those are something that is a yes or no, shouldn't arbitrarily be used when analyzing this application, and should be able to be on notice on whether this application meets those or not as it goes through the process. Anything to add?
No.
Okay.
Yes or no?
Well, yes, if we don't like, as I mentioned, kind of to you before the meeting, if you don't like the criteria, there's an avenue to change those, right? We wanna add them, we wanna change them, we wanna do different things to them. But a public hearing for land use action, the criteria listed are what the decision needs to be
Right.
based on.
Yeah, as long as that's the code, that's the criteria, and if you don't like that criteria, that will be another setting by which we can change that, like have proposals to change that
Yes.
criteria.
Absolutely.
Got
Yeah.
it.
And a lot of these things are gonna be answered by an expert in the field, i.e. the city planner or the city engineer. Cause you guys don't know if the carrying capacity of our collector or arterial streets require lower traffic levels. That is not something I expect you to know. I expect you to look towards staff who deal with those answers every day for an answer to that. And so Kevin, our city engineer, would provide a memo that says, yes, we have the water and sewer capacity for this development. Yes, the streets have the carrying capacity to handle this development. Yes, the physical limitations require you to have or limited development to low density. He's the expert in the field when it comes to those answers, and he's gonna provide those to you guys so that you can see that it does meet this criteria, because I don't expect you to know the answers to these. And if there is ever a time when something comes before you and we haven't provided an answer, and you don't feel comfortable making that call because you are not the expert, that's something you should be asking us for staff. And it'd be preferable if you could ask us before the meeting so that we can try to get it to you by the meeting, so that we're not pushing off a decision on this application moving forward. Or if there's just any question at all to begin with, if the city engineer has provided an answer saying, yes, I believe the streets have enough carrying capacity for this, but there might still be a concern from you guys about traffic, you can ask us that concern prior to, be like, look, I know the city engineer has given us a memo that says traffic's good to go. However, I still have these concerns about traffic. Can you guys address those?
Right.
And we're happy to address those, or to tell you if there's a time in the future when those can be addressed by the applicant. Cause there's a lot of process that happens on these land use applications. They don't come, they don't come before you once. They come before you like 3, 4, 5 times, depending on what it is. And there's different times in the process when we can attach different conditions to address different concerns that you guys have. And that's when the appropriate times would be for those things.
Now, I do have a question.
Yeah.
So, I see in number 3, in areas where municipal water facilities and sewage disposal facilities are provided. And that is one of those, like when I'm looking at the concerns of people, and I'm out in the community a lot. I talk to a lot of people. I listen to what those concerns are. And so a lot of what I'm hearing, like when I walk those precincts and I knock on hundreds of doors and listen to their concerns, is, a lot of people say, well, I'm not against growth, but they just don't want to outrun our resources. Like they want us to grow responsibly is what I'm hearing. And so that would be looking at water, fire, police. Education, obviously, for when people have their kids there, that is a concern for people, like if there's not enough capacity and so forth. But that's kind of I kind of put that one a little bit to the side of the water, fire, and police, because those are defending life and property. And so obviously number 3 addresses water. Like obviously if the water municipality said, hey, we don't have the ability to support like putting XYZ on this property, then they would send us a letter and say, hey, we can't do that at this time. Is it possible to include fire and police in there? Like, so essentially, like if you had your...
Every single land use application has a letter from the fire district.
Yeah.
The police
Right.
or the city.
But
are
is it in
offered
the
a comment.
criteria? Because
that would be a chase. we'd have to have a discussion on criteria for the zoning.
Right.
We'd have to make suggestions, we'd have to move to public hearings to change.
Right.
Yes.
Because like we learned from the last thing, they can send a letter, but if it's not in the criteria, you can't use it as a factor
We
for
could
your
probably
decision
do
for saying
something
yes or
along the
no.
lines of, that in areas where emergency services are available or
Mhm.
can be provided or something like that, that could potentially be a criteria
Right.
added.
It could, but for example, every single land use action that we do, I send a request for comment for the police
Right.
department.
But that's not what she's saying, James.
But they don't comment.
But-
If the fire department
Right.
doesn't comment, does that mean that they're in opposition and they don't meet the criteria?
I wouldn't say that.
Well,
I'd
but
That's my
but
concern.
also think about this. In 4 years, we've never gotten a letter from, and again, I understand that there can be other circumstances with the school district, but in 4 years, we never got a letter where they said, unfortunately, we can't support this in this circumstance.
Settlement
But-
Mountain got a negative letter exactly with that language.
But it's not part of the criteria, so because it's not part of our local ordinance, we can't include that as a factor for denial.
Yep.
So that's what, putting that one aside, the other two factors that I'm thinking would be good to have and to take into consideration so that we're growing responsibly and not outrunning local resources, because obviously it does take resources to build to provide for whatever is built, is if we potentially in the future could do a proposal where we could add fire and police and debate it and have a conversation about
I would
it.
say police is probably a better call than fire, just because the police are part of the city
Mm-hmm.
and we can respond on behalf of the police on whether a police service can be provided
Right.
for a land use action. We can't respond on behalf of the fire district. So
Mhm.
James is exactly right. If we make a fire district decision as part of the criteria and they don't respond,
Mhm.
does that automatically mean that now this application it has to be denied because we haven't received something from a different jurisdiction that we have no control over whether they respond or not, because they haven't responded and proven that they can provide service there?
Could we?
It's
Is there
like
any?
adding the school.
Could
It's
you?
like
Is there any way you could put in there that if they do not respond within a certain period of time, then we are free to approve it?
For a land use map,
Right.
why are we going to this extent? That's what bothers me, because it's hypothetical. We don't even know what it's going to be used for technically until a design comes about. So they have an idea, a conceptual idea, but it doesn't mean anything until it's presented to you guys, and
Until the
then
plat.
For example,
Right.
a rezone by the Hayden Area statute.
Maybe let's not
rezone
use an example of one, because that's still
From
plan-
commercial
yeah.
to residential.
Mhm.
The rezone doesn't add any houses. It doesn't add any burden to water and sewer. It doesn't do anything at all except change what could be there in the future. Right? So sometimes I think we're reaching ahead.
We have no idea how many houses could be there. You could build one house in an R1, you could build however many houses you could fit there in an R1.
Well, I think the thing though, and again, I think it's important that I look at these as crucial, respectful, honest conversations, because it's an opportunity to address the variety of concerns that we hear, and that when we're accountable to people too, because they're like, what decision did you make that affected us? So it's kind of like going, okay, if we're able to just talk about some of those concerns. And as you know, and we always go through this, like say it's not the preliminary plat, it's the final plat. The time to have made the decision was at annexation or at a zone change, or and so that is why getting the criteria right from the beginning, like to going, what factors are we going to consider for saying yes or no to something, that I think it's important. If there's something that is a concern to people, like maybe fire, let's say police, because you said that one's a little bit more that maybe we can determine more there. If police is something that we do want to take into consideration when making a decision, then we have to put it in the criteria.
Yeah.
And really, it's at a zone
I
change
think at the plat part, you would want it at
or an
plat.
annexation
I think
too?
at plat you want
Because
it.
that's gonna determine everything else in the
no.
I
future.
think you
of
want
the
it
zone.
at the plat, at development.
We
Right.
have maybe 500 acres of property that's been in the city for 2 or 3 decades that's got grass on it.
It hasn't been developed.
Right.
So a decision on the annexation, if police coverage could have, water, sewer availability.
It doesn't mean anything until they actually get to development. That's when we wanna know that police and fire can serve that development, is when they bring the plat. So, for example, I just pulled up Title 12. This is on plats. We do send, so agencies to review the plat. We forward it to Power, Gas, Panhandle Health, Fire, School, and other appropriate and agencies. So they do get plats that come in for development.
So is that part of the criteria for saying yes or no?
I don't believe those
So
are.
the
Wait,
letters-
right here, actually. Fire protection is right here. Is one of the, so here's the requirements for approval. Here's the express standards
For
right
a
here.
preliminary plat.
So the proposal includes provisions for streets, drainage, alleys, public ways, open space, fire protection, and other appropriate public and private improvements.
And
But that doesn't specify
No,
public
when-
and private
when-
improvements.
At the prelim plat stage, they are required to go to the fire department, who gives us a letter
Mm-hmm.
that says what they have to do in that plat, period.
Right.
They have to have this many hydrants, they have to have this many turnarounds, access points,
Right.
et cetera. And the fire department, we can't even approve the plat without fire district approval there.
So if, say, with the preliminary plat, if the water department sent a letter and said, for like at this given time, we are unable to provide service because of XYZ, would we be able to use that as a reason for denial?
Right here, adequate water supply and sewer disposal are available as of the date of the plat approval by city engineer.
And the same with fire?
So
Would it
fire,
would it ever be presented to us if any of that criteria wasn't met?
yes,
It could be.
So if fire said no, this absolutely will not meet criteria, we cannot cover it, we do not have the
Well,
personnel, we do
we
not.
can't provide service to this area.
In theory, a plat could come to us, but we couldn't.
So
If they
that's,
said we can't provide service to this area, then they aren't meeting their requirements per code. Like, they
So-
have their own requirements, they have
Right.
to provide service.
but what if they're saying at this particular time, we're unable to provide adequate goods and services? Would, according to that section in terms of approval for a preliminary plat, so fire, police, and water, are all those 3 criteria for reason for denial, or only 2?
Water and sewer,
But not fire?
correct, only adequate provisions for fire, so if they didn't make the fire hydrants and the access points that the fire department wants, because the fire department will not come out and say, cannot provide service to this area. All they can say is, these are the requirements for you to have in your plat, as far as fire hydrants and access points, because they have to provide service.
But
That
what
is
if-
their legal requirement.
But what if they are at a point where they can't provide adequate goods and services,
That's
or
not up
even
to you to
police?
decide. That is up to them, and they
Yeah.
have to provide service. At what determines adequate is not up to us.
Like, what if they say we can't get to people in time because
What
we
is
don't
in
have the
time?
resource?
There's no set national
According to
standard.
national
There's
state-
no national standard that they have to legally required to meet. They just have to provide service.
So how about police? Is
There's
that
no national standard they are required to meet. They just have to provide service.
mhm. So it's what you're saying is the quality of that service is not a factor. It's just
Correct.
this, if they can provide service.
Yes.
But what if they said they couldn't provide service?
Then it falls back on them, like she said, they're
They wouldn't because
required.
they're required to provide
required.
service in
Okay.
their
They
service
can't.
area.
They
They
basically
can't
can't
say we
that.
can't provide service.
Yeah, you can't call 911 and they
And they
say,
don't pick
sorry,
Right.
you're out of
Yeah,
luck.
yeah.
So-
We ran out of people to help like an hour ago.
If you would, there is a possible consideration we could do at annexation and or rezoning that just says, is police and fire, services provided to this property?
Mhm.
It's gonna be a yes, but at least it's there so that we're showing it's being met.
And
Would that be something
I
that-
think that what it would show is taking care and consideration of people's concerns.
I wouldn't be able to include adequate because
Right.
there is no but I can
Exactly.
say, is it provided to this land or to this property? Yes or no? That would be an express standard we could potentially include.
Yeah,
So
I
we can
think
we can talk about including that, yes.
because I think that's one of the things is that when there's such a low standard, that is a concern of a lot of people is, hey, like are we draining all of our resources for the people that currently live here? And but again, I understand the principle that it needs to have the express standards, and also you want those to be fair. And so that's why we have to have the conversation now, is that if that's something that we do want to
Yes.
include, we have to talk about it and consider it and find out if, we can have a proposal to consider it, and like the city council can say, nope, we don't want to do that, and that's fine. And then we just have to follow what the express standards are at that
Yes.
point. So it doesn't matter anybody that comes through here, anybody that you see out there. It's like, well, this is what the requirements are, and if and
So what happens if the levies don't pass?
well,
That's
it's
not
an
within our
express
jurisdiction.
standard.
No, and
to
then
do
we don't
anything
have enough
for,
fire
unfortunately.
Right.
department people,
So, I will
personnel, or
say-
anything else. So it's not within our
Yeah.
power to dictate anything based on
Other
an
jurisdictions.
entity outside of the control of the city, just like the school. Because when this next levy doesn't pass, what are you doing?
Right.
You're not gonna shell out the money for football and all the sports to
Right.
still exist. They're gone.
Yeah.
So same thing. Fire department. The only thing they have control over is police department.
Yeah, we do. I will say, all of these different things, we plan for growth. I know people think that potentially we approve things willy-nilly without any thought for the future, but we do plan for growth. So there are impact fees collected for fire, for EMS, for police, for streets. We collect cap fees from developers so that we can increase the sizes of our sewer and our water systems, and we have plans in place for when those get upsized, when they get replaced, so that we can keep ahead of capacity needs as we move forward. We budget for those things, we save for those things, development pays for those things, and then we do them as they come up in our plan. So it's not like we just wait until we run out of capacity to say, oh no, now we have to change. No, we plan ahead so that we are always ensuring that we have enough capacity to fulfill existing and future needs. Yeah, and you can build on that.
Nina and Nick, you guys were here when we reviewed the capital improvements plan last year, major road upgrades in the existing part of town. Developers, we make them build the new stuff, and then we use those fees that we collect for them to
To
pay
redo
for the
existing stuff. So not only are they building brand new stuff for everybody, but then they pay so that we can redo existing roads for everybody. So they pay double. They do double for everybody.
And who was it, city engineer that was talking about Bakel when the roundabout was supposed to go in, that in the future they're looking at expanding it, making it wider, even though it's at a level A.
Well, at the moment, it operates at a level A level of service, but
Right.
the city's adopted
It's
standard is.
Not enough traffic is actually going through it at the moment. That's why there are wrecks that happen, because it's not full enough. It's not operating
So
at the capacity it's supposed to be operating
People are
at.
coming in too fast.
And they're
because-
not,
Yes.
and there's not enough cars already in it to make people slow down to yield, and so they just go, and that's how you end up with wrecks. So it's kind of before its time, but it was needed.
Right.
But that's
Yeah.
the planning, that's
Right.
two lane roundabout instead of a single, whereas
Yes.
you wouldn't build a single lane and then 10 years later have to build and expand it.
Right,
Yeah.
and that's why it was designed the way it is.
Yes, and people don't think that this design was correct, but
Yes.
it is correct. It's just operating a higher level of service than what is probably optimal. Probably needs to be at like a B, not an A.
Or a C.
Yeah, for it to actually be working correctly, you need cars in it.
Right.
So that's why there's a problem. But yeah, that's the whole point. We try to plan ahead. We budget. We get grants. We do things like that to get out of ahead of things like
Well,
that.
and I think that the desire that, like, from what I'm hearing, is just that whatever criteria we have, that it helps us to grow responsibly. That's
I
just the main
absolutely
goal
agree.
and the main
Yeah.
point of that.
As long as the criteria is listed in an express way where it can be answered yes or no at the outset, and there's no surprises when it gets brought before you guys and before council, that's how you meet the legal requirements under Idaho code.
Well, and I
That's it.
think the other thing is, like, so you're dealing with people all day long, and you're dealing with the things, the plans, and what they want to do, and then they're advising as the city attorney and so forth, and
No, I don't talk with.
well, whatever you all do, because I'm not here, so I don't see everything you
She
all do all
advises
day.
me.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
James talks to
Yeah,
James
but I'm
talks to
sure he
everybody.
counsels with you if he has a question or something, and then you counsel with him. And so you're constantly seeing the codes.
Yep.
You're constantly seeing the application of the codes. And I think that, so you have more of an opportunity to see things that we may not see all
Correct.
the time. And so I think if you could just keep that frame, take that into consideration, is that one of the things I'm out doing is knocking on those doors. Is that is what a predominant thing I'm hearing is just people want to grow responsibly.
Yeah.
They know growth is going to happen.
Mhm.
So we're not going to say no to everything, but not yes to everything. Just saying growing responsibly where we're meeting the criteria and we set the right criteria to begin with.
I will say
Yeah.
that we try not to bring anything before you guys until it meets the criteria 100%. So James turns away probably 85%, 90% of what's submitted to him the first time until they get it right. Sometimes it takes many, many months before they get it right, and then they have to bring it back, and then it comes to you guys when it is right. So
Right.
if it feels like you guys are saying yes to everything, that's because we are the ones telling them they don't meet the criteria at the beginning, and we try to make sure they do meet it before they get to you.
Right.
So that's kind of why when it comes to you guys, usually it is a yes.
Mhm.
That's where we're at. Or we try to have conditions ready to go that you guys can put on them with your approval so that it addresses any further concerns you might have. Hopefully that makes sense.
It does. To
Now,
me.
I'm gonna build on that just a little teeny bit, right? I weed stuff out, but I can't stop them from coming here if they want to continue with their application. I can tell them this doesn't meet anything, and most people go, okay, and they go away.
Then you have the 10% that won't listen,
Yeah.
and they do continue to bring it to you guys, even when we say no. And
that's when you bring up the fact that it doesn't meet this criteria.
And that is why I provide you with code analysis and comprehensive plan analysis for those, to show you where they don't meet those things. Subdivisions, there's more criteria in there that they have to meet conditions of approval in addition to the conditions or what's in the land use ordinance. So I'm trying to give that to you.
So in our packets, when we get, and again, I've seen the how you'll say yes, this is to be determined, etc. Is that always including everything in our local ordinances, in our city codes as well? Like, meaning, does that include the complete criteria that's required by our ordinances?
Well, for a subdivision ordinance, it's gonna have all the requirements of Title 12. Does
Okay.
it meet the requirements of the subdivision ordinance? Yes. Does it meet the requirements of, 15, or for
all of the
reason?
performance standards for,
Right. Because you can
whatever
have
it's
the comprehensive plan, you can have all of those things, but like we have learned, if it's not in the code, in the criteria, it doesn't, it's not a factor
Right.
that
And
you
James
can use
does
for.
include those criteria for you. Yes, he
Right.
does do that.
Right, so for a subdivision plat, or, subdivision plat. same
Right.
thing. Right, there's 4 criteria for approval of a plat, but there's also criteria that they have to get past me before I bring it to you, which is Title 12, right? Everything has to have enough frontage to put a driveway with their setbacks. They have to meet the minimum lot size, you have to have the right road widths, you have to have your swales, you have to have everything.
Right, right, right.
That's not in the criteria, but they have to have that before I'll bring it here.
Right. Well,
Right,
because
so there's-
what I understood from now and previously is if it's the only reason for denial is if it's in the code, but also the same way, the only way it can be approved is if they meet all the criteria in the code, and it's all in the code.
Right,
Like if
and
it's
that's
not,
because of
that's
the requirement that we have an express standard.
right. That's the only thing that we can say yes or no based off of is if it's in the code, in essentially our law.
Yes.
our city law.
It is our law.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely. But like we mentioned, those criteria can be modified.
right,
You can make a motion to hold a workshop to change code, right?
Right.
We can take
Or
a
you just
suggestion from the
direct
public.
us.
Or the council can direct us to amend code.
Right.
We've seen that before. A prime example would be accessory dwelling units, right? We did a lot of work, we passed code, we had some accessory dwelling units or an application or two. They got approved, council looked at it and they said, we do not like how this worked at all, take it back, redo it. So we did, because
That's what they asked for.
that's what they asked for, and that's what we did. But, yeah, the decisions have to be based on the code, and those express standards are there, and we have to use them. And I know.
And
well, but I mean, I think it's important to weigh them carefully, consider them carefully, because whatever you put in there is how you're going to be making your decisions, and there's always short-term and long-term consequences, and you want to make sure that those have been thoroughly explored, so that
it is
we don't put
helpful
something in there that's not good.
If you have concerns about a certain criteria, if you send those concerns to us beforehand so that we can make sure to get you any documentation or reasoning or
Right.
anything we have used to weigh those criteria. So if you have additional traffic concerns or additional water concerns or whatever it is, let us know and we will provide you additional documentation, research, memos, whatever it is you need to show that we did, look, these are all the things we looked at to make sure that it did meet this criteria.
So if we say when studying the code, and we're like, oh, could we put that in as a factor? Is the best way to address that to send you an email and say, hey, could we put this on the agenda as a thing? And again, sometimes it's nice to be able to talk about it in advance, because you might go, I can see that you have this idea. Have you considered this?
Yes.
Because I wouldn't want to also waste time on the agenda if you were like, have you thought about this? And you're like, maybe I didn't. And then you think about it and you're like, yeah, I can see how that could be a problem,
Also, this is your time. If you want something to discuss and you want it
Right.
on the agenda as a discussion item, you're not
Right.
wasting time.
Right.
It's your time.
Exactly.
But it's nice if we have a chance to prepare so we can give you the best information, alternatives, things like that, because there are going to be some things that you guys want to do or say that don't fall under the Idaho code or correctly, and we need to say, okay, we can't do it this way. However, here are a couple options that we could do. We can only offer those options to you if we are able to do the research ahead of time to come up with those options.
Right.
That's the only way they get to you. So giving us questions and concerns beforehand so that we can give you the legal way to proceed to address those concerns is really, really important.
Awesome.
So the second part of that Idaho code, so the first part was we have to base decisions on express standards as listed in our land use code. The second part is that you guys have to do this reason statement, which means that your decisions have to be accompanied by a statement that explains the criteria and standards that were used. This is why if you guys end up denying a decision, you are asked to say which of the criteria you're using for your denial. So you have to link the facts to the criteria and use that as your decision so that James can then do your notice of decision. That becomes your reason statement.
Recommendation.
Or your recommendation that then goes to council, so that they can see that. So that is why we have to link it all together. Does that make sense? Okay. If there is no reason statement, then failure to identify the nature of compliance or non-compliance with the express approval standards will be grounds for invalidation, so by a court. So if you guys don't provide a reason statement, council doesn't provide a reason statement, you just say no, and don't say which legal criteria you're using, how the facts apply to that criteria, and why you're using that to deny, and it's not reasonable, like you just pulled something out of thin air, then a judge can take that through judicial review and invalidate the decision of this city and allow the application to proceed anyways. And then the city is on the hook to pay for those court fees and those attorney's fees that applicant had to use to go to court to sue us.
And this is why I'm always in those public hearings saying, no, you have to base it on one of the criteria.
Right.
It has to be there because otherwise, we risk having everything just tossed out. I don't have a personal stake if you approve or deny.
We do not have personal stakes with that at all. We don't care if you approve or deny. We do care if you use the legal criteria correctly, legally, and reasonably, and apply the facts to that criteria in your decisions. That's it. Okay. I just wanted to touch base on the comp plan because it's a word used a lot, and some of you may not really understand what a comprehensive plan is. That's fair. So there is a court cases, this is just one of many. A comprehensive plan is not a mandate. It should not drive decision making. It is not legally controlling. It is a guidance document. It is a document that we are required to do under the LUPA. It has a whole bunch of stuff that we are supposed to try to include as part of our planning. It is something we can look to for planning, and it's something we do look for, especially with the future land use map that's attached, to see where different zonings should go throughout the city. That is where we make determinations like, okay, we can see higher density in this area, we're gonna plan for it to be here. And then if a zoning rezone comes before you guys and they wanna do higher density there because they're not currently zoned that, we've already decided that that's okay there. So you guys can then proceed with working on approval of that. So, but it is a guidance document. It's not something that's controlling. It's not used in decision making unless it's one of the specific criteria for that land use decision. There are some in there in our land use ordinance that does say it meets the comprehensive plan. Usually it's when we're changing the use, like residential to commercial, commercial to residential. It's a change in full on use. That's when we want to look at the comp plan because typically we have to do a future land use map amendment to make sure that it actually works in that area, whatever they're asking for. So,
But it's not in the criteria that it has to follow the land use map or the
so there are
comprehensive
some,
plan,
there are
or
some
does
ordinances-
it?
there are some ordinances that we have that it does say it has to meet the comp plan.
Okay.
Not, our code currently,
I think it's-
residential to residential doesn't require a
because we've already
comprehensive plan.
decided where residential is going to be. So that's already there. But
Right.
if for the commercial,
Commercial
if
to
someone's gonna
residential
rezone-
or residential to commercial or industrial, we do apply, it is a criteria.
because we want to make sure that we have chosen a location for that use that is appropriate with our planning activities. So we go back to our guiding document, we look at it and say, okay, does this fit in what we have planned for our future? Yes, it does. No, it doesn't. Okay, if it does, okay, you can proceed with your rezone if you meet the other criteria.
So essentially, in the Rathdrum code, it will say whether it utilizes the comprehensive plan or land
As a
use
criteria,
as
yes.
a criteria.
Let me see if I can grab one. So right here, so this is an industrial. So someone came in here asking for an industrial rezone to industrial. Here is one of the criteria, there's 7 of them. Industrial areas should comply with the goals and policies of the Rathdrum Comprehensive Plan.
And the future land use map
It's
is a
part of that.
component of the future, or
Of the comprehensive plan. So it has to be in areas where our goals and policies for planning purposes we want industrial places to be. So that is why it is a criteria for this one. Again, should not be applied arbitrarily. You can't use the comp plan to grant one and then use the comp plan to deny another in the same breath. You have to apply it consistently and not arbitrarily. So if they meet the comp plan, then they meet it. If they don't, has to be objective, cannot be arbitrary, because it all has to fall, it has to be an express, non-arbitrary standard. So it's helped with long-range planning. It does help us create our city code. So a lot of the code updates that we come to you guys with, like we just did that big code update, a lot of that is because we have goals in the comp plan that James looks at and is like, okay, we have a goal here that we are supposed to provide more diversity in our zoning designations. How do I interpret that? Well, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come up with a bunch of different zoning designations that have different mishmashes of sizes of lots, and that's gonna be my interpretation of diversity per the comp plan. I'm gonna bring that and we'll see if that's what the commission and council approve of.
The MR zone was my response to the comprehensive plans dictate that we provide an R1 hybrid zone, right? It provides large lots and some smaller lots, depending on which one we're looking at. So that's where that came from, is because the comprehensive plan that I inherited said that we needed more zones to do that.
Right.
So I look at it, I come up with something, I present it to you, we do the mix, we move forward.
So James doesn't come up with code updates just out of thin air. It's either based on concerns he's receiving from the public, trying to make our code easier to apply based on those concerns, or he's using the comp plan, the goals in there, to come up with code updates to kind of fall in line with what the comp plan is saying we're trying to plan for the future. Does that make sense? Okay. So we are going to be working on updating the comp plan. It's gonna probably be a minor update because we just did a major one when it was adopted in 2021. The big one that we're gonna be doing, probably the largest overhaul on, is the future land use map. It is wildly outdated. And so I think that we will start with that probably in March, doing a workshop with you guys on updating the future land use map. And so just go into these workshops understanding this is our planning, our guidance document. It's not necessarily something that's gonna dictate decisions moving forward, but it is something that we will follow to create code that will dictate decisions. So we wanna make sure that it's as accurate as possible and we're giving, due concern to the areas that need it as far as planning goes. If that makes sense. And that's the end of my workshop. If there's any other questions, happy to answer, or we can discuss more. If there's other trainings or workshops you guys want in the future, just send us an email. We're happy to put that on a future agenda to just discuss things or concerns or whatever you guys want. Don't feel shy about asking for training or to have discussions, because we can have those.
Alrighty.
And if you ever want stuff from our engineer on how he makes water decisions, sewer decisions, traffic decisions, any of those, because I realize those come up a lot as concerns, we could bring the engineer in. He can answer questions for you guys. He can provide documentation to you guys. Whatever you guys need or want, we can provide that. So, or even the police, if that's something that you want to talk to our police, we'll bring in them and you can talk to our lieutenant about how he plans for the future. So feel free to just ask.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Well,
That's it.
is there a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Alright. Is there a second?
Second.
Alright. All those in
You.
favor?
Aye.
Alright.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.